Hey, friends, I'm Otis Gibbs, and this is my buddy Jim Herrington. He's going to tell you the story about how Tom Petty gave him his big break as a photographer.
So, there was a bit of Southern pride in Tom Petty. He'd already moved to LA and started making records there, but, we knew he was from the South. And it's like, he's really great. And he's from the South. So I was a big Tom Petty fan. All me and my friends, this is something we could really kind of get around. But I ended up moving to Hollywood in the early 80s. And, I'm trying to get work and do things as a photographer. I'm still young. I'm still sucking in some ways, not that great, but getting better, trying hard. And I become friends with this guy who had been doing work with Billy Idol, Bob Dylan, all these people that kind of shared the same management, and Tom Petty. And he knew I was a Petty fan and everything. But anyway, one day I was at his house. He goes, I got to go over to Petty and them are rehearsing over in the Valley. Do you want to go? And I said, I guess so. So we went over to Burbank to Frank Zappa's rehearsal joint, Joe's Garage. And so we went over. I happened to have my camera with me. So we went over there. And there's Petty and the guys just in a rehearsal joint. Rehearsing and smoking lots of weed. So I go in and, get very high with those guys, and they're all friendly, and I take some pictures. And we hang out for 2 or 3 hours, and then we leave. I remember Tom holding the door open, and he goes, I'll see you tomorrow. And I'm like, you will. And that just became 2 years or so of showing up and hanging out. So I was shooting all these pictures and hanging out with him, kind of coming in the back door through the sky. But then MCA Records started seeing these pictures, and he said, who's this guy shooting Petty and getting behind the scenes? So they started hiring me, and then the management started the same thing, started seeing him. It's like, Petty seems to like this guy, so we'll start hiring him. And that's what happened. So I started getting jobs from MCA and the management and just hanging out. Going over to their house, his house, their house. And that was all fun, of course, because, I was starstruck in the beginning, obviously, because I was a big fan, but then they just turned out to be Southern guys that were like my friends. They had good taste in music, and they were very nice guys, and funny guys. Back here somewhere, I've got the skateboarding picture when I went over. Every time you're around him, there's pot and coffee. Never any, I don't remember booze ever, but it was just pot and coffee and cigarettes. So going over to his house, there was coffee. It must have been Maxwell House. I didn't ask him, and he didn't say, would you like some Maxwell House coffee? He just said, would you like some coffee?
When he's on that skateboard, did he just happen to get out a skateboard and he was actually a skateboarder?
He was a skateboarder in Florida. And I'm like, why? I was a skateboarder back in the day too. So we were just walking around his house. I think we'd probably gotten high, and we're in the garage. And I said, a skateboard. And he said, yeah. And he picked it up and he started skating around. Then I skated, and we're like skating back and forth. I'm like, I got to get a picture of Petty skateboarding. And so I just clicked it. But, he's obviously a skateboarder. If you see that photo, he's, he may not be doing it every day, but he obviously had skateboarded before. He had a very Dogtown, smooth surf style. On and off. Once I left LA in the late 80s to move to New York. And so the only place I would see Petty then was at a show. If I was in the same city as a show, I would call the management and get some tickets and go see him. I took my mom to see him. I took probably a friend or two somewhere, but go backstage and say hey, but that was it.
I'm guessing you heard about his passing like everyone else did.
Yeah, it was just so, I wrote this thing on Facebook. It just really, it really affected me. It's not like we were best friends or anything, but we connected and we were friends. He's a busy guy with friends all over the world and all kinds of stuff. But it just, I don't know, he meant a lot. His music meant a lot. And he gave me a break, you know. I was a greenhorn rookie at that time, and he kind of allowed me. I mean, he was a superstar at that point. And he kind of just, you know, let me in the door and said, "See you tomorrow." And you know, in a lot of ways, he, you know, it was the thing in my career that really, like, took it off. I mean, I guess it would have happened with somebody sooner or later, but the way it happened with him was super cool. All those guys were great. He was great. I just always liked the way he stood up for his fans and, you know, the whole thing about raising the album price. I mean, he went up against his record label and called bullshit and all this stuff. So I just thought he was very honorable, super talented. I mean, everybody loved him. Bob Dylan loved him. George Harrison loved him. He's loved by Beatles and Dylan. He was universally loved. People just liked being around him. And he was a music fan. Besides all his talent, he just loved, he was always listening to Elvis Sun era stuff. Like kind of almost autistically always listening to Sun, Elvis, and Maxwell House Coffee. But BR 549 opened for him at 328, and it was just an opportunity to shoot him. And by that point, that Little Darling Years CD had come out that Dan Cooper put together, the one that kind of really got, if you not many people knew about the Little Darling Johnny Paycheck stuff, and when that thing came out, it really made some ripples. And because, you know, I didn't know that much about him in the 90s. I knew Take This Job and Shove It and all that stuff, which I liked all right. But, you know, that Little Darling stuff just rocked my world, changed my life. So I was already, you know, suddenly a massive Paycheck fan. And I couldn't really say that before the Little Darling stuff. And then, you know, suddenly I thought he was the best country singer that ever lived. And those records are so good. So I really wanted to photograph him. He already had emphysema. I remember at the 328, someone came up before he said, and this is back when you can smoke in a club. Remember those days? And they asked, could you please not anybody smoke in the entire club? And he was not doing so good. You know, he was probably not living that much longer after this thing. But I got him backstage in that grimy little backstage room, which was kind of just perfect for his big belt buckle and his starched jeans with the seam down the front.
Was he friendly at all?
I don't remember that. I don't think he was unfriendly. I think he was just dead-ass neutral. He was certainly allowed it to happen. I don't remember anything mean or nice, just straight down the middle. Yeah, we'll do it. Sure, we'll do a picture. It really was a quickie, man. There was nothing like, this was just like ducking in backstage. You know, it's been 25 years ago at this point. We may have had some conversation, but it was nothing significant. And he was weak. I mean, and I'm not sure how much longer he lived after that, to be honest. When did he die? Do you know? He wasn't that great. I mean, you know, and we were dying to hear anything of the Little Darling Years. I think he played one song, like A11. Maybe one other. I guarantee he didn't play more than two songs that we all wanted to hear, and it was a lot of other stuff.
Did he have much voice?
No. It was full on. I mean, literally, they were saying don't smoke. So that his emphysema was, I mean, he was talking like that.
His singing on those early records is just amazing. It's just amazing.
All of it. I mean, the writing, the playing, the production, his singing. But yeah, his singing. So somehow I just kind of fell into archaeology, going back and finding a lot of these people that had been forgotten forever. A lot of, you know, and it was a lot of American music, jazz, blues, country, rockabilly, rock and roll people. And then No Depression magazine came out, you know, out of Seattle. Grant Alden and Peter Blackstock. And Grant took a liking to me and understood my plight of trying to get access to these people. And so they didn't have a big budget, but he was great at hiring. He knew exactly what I wanted to do, finding these old people. And he could say, hey, the magazine wants Jim Herrington. So it just gave me carte blanche to go shoot. So he was always, anytime there was an old person, he would hire me. And he had Merle Haggard coming up for an interview. I said, so I got the job and I went out to Temecula, California, which is where he was playing at a casino gig, but that's where he could do it. So I flew to LA, drove way down to Temecula, and it's just ugly as shit out there, or at least where I went, where the casino was, just this horrible parking lot in a white corrugated metal shed, kind of. But I had my big 4x5 camera. I was doing everything on 4x5 all the time back there, under the blanket, on the tripod. So Merle came out to the bus, or maybe he was already in the bus, and I went to his bus, whatever it was. We ended up in the bus and smoked some pot. And he had to feel me out a little bit. But we got along because, I like music and I can always talk music, and that's always gotten people to settle down, that I'm not just some guy from Parade magazine or something. Remember Parade magazine, kids? So we had a little dialogue talking about, Bakersfield country and stuff like that. And he's like, okay, this guy's all right. So we went outside and somebody's kid was out there on a big wheel. And we get off the bus kind of high, and Merle goes and gets on the big wheel. And somewhere I've got pictures of that, but I've misplaced them. I've got Merle Haggard on a big wheel. But anyway, for the cover of the magazine, which should have been Merle on a big wheel, but instead I ended up shooting this photo right over here, over my shoulder. Can we see that in the camera? You have to trust me. And, shooting a big 4x5 camera, those cameras take a lot more light. And so shutter speeds are longer. You need to have it on a tripod. The way that I've always used them is with a very short depth of field, meaning the focus is not deep, it's very shallow. So here I was shooting someone stoned and old. And so I had the camera on there, and I always got to tell people, you got to hold really still. Even after I come out from under the blanket, you got to keep holding still. I'm going to close this, open the film, cock the shirt. I'm going to do all this stuff. Keep holding still, and then I'll tell you when. And people can never do this. They're waving, and you always get one in focus shot for 9 out of focus shots. But I did all the thing, turn, cock the thing, and it's like a 1 second long shutter speed, because now it's like the sun is already set. I mean, it's very bright California sky, but the sun is already below the horizon. So, and I shoot another one. Anyway, I get them all home when I can really look at them, and every single one of them is laser sharp. He didn't move a muscle. I just remember about Merle, like he went into like some kind of monk state where he, turned into granite. He was, every single one, he didn't move. And he gave me that look, and that, he was good.
What did Grant Alden think when he saw the image?
Put it on the cover. I think he said this needs to be on the back of a buffalo nickel or something like that, or the front of the other side from the buffalo. If we're leaving the buffalo on, put Merle on the other side. I'm shooting, it was going to be nighttime soon, and I'm shooting, I don't even think I took lights. It's really reckless to show up to shoot a job with this big rickety 4x5 camera of a major star. You don't know how they're going to react. I mean, I always had good reactions, but you're very much being specific. There's not a net for that kind of photography, really. So I was always a little bit scared because you just don't know what's going to happen. Things can fuck up easy with this kind of gear and stuff. So, and you don't get Merle Haggard every day. So, and and also what I was using back then was this Polaroid that is called Type 55. They stopped making it. It was a beautiful thing, but you would load this film, put it in the film holder, pull the dark slide up, take the picture, usually a slow exposure, put the thing back, pull it through this, like Polaroid, the chemicals get spread through these rollers, and you'd pull it out, ring, hold it for 60 seconds, and then you open it. And with this kind of thing, there was not only a Polaroid, but there was a beautiful negative that came with it, like a real negative on negative film. And you had to put that negative in sodium sulfite, which is basically fixer. So there was just being out in the field, you had to depend on what kind of water you were getting. Sometimes you got like ice cold water and that's all you had, or sometimes you just got hot water and that's all you had. And so these negatives were always like delicate, and you had to get back to a hotel room or sometimes just fly directly. So it wasn't, it was probably, I think I had a good reaction to some of these pictures, but you just never know. Are they really in focus? Is the negative sometimes there would just be dud negatives that the emulsion would come off. So, at that point I was really good with this material and this film and this camera, but there was still just like stuff that could happen. So I think it was days before it really sank in that I got this. I love the picture now, but it took a while for it to sink in that I got a good picture of him. Is it safe? Did I,
I can see that.
And I think it was I think it was hot. I think it was hot summer California, and I think the negatives did get slightly tortured before I could really, because I would usually, you can't leave them soaking forever. So usually I would have to, I would do this stuff in a hotel bathroom. I would have these negatives. I'd have to figure out how to hang them up. I would take clothespins and a string, and I would put them in the bathroom, but then I couldn't use the bathroom because I didn't want dust on it. So it's like I would make sure I use the bathroom before I lock it up. That's what I used to do.
That's beautiful.
Digital photography is for pussies. So things have changed a lot since digital photography came into the realm, and that started around 2000. Before 2000, people were still shooting film. So a lot of stuff has changed since about, and also 9/11. It seems like the digital camera world really happened after 9/11 happened. I don't know why. A lot of things changed, but yeah, even in the 90s, which that was with Merle, people just, when you break out that 4x5 camera, they feel like they're getting their picture taken. It's like, this is a different thing. And, not many people were doing that in the 90s. And I was, it's the same with the Peter Murphy story that you mentioned. It's like, if I can just tell that, that was just a publicity session at the Wiltern Theater during the day. Peter Murphy's playing at the glamorous Wiltern Theater in Hollywood, 1920s Art Deco theater, with a big lobby. So about 2 p.m, he makes time to do for magazine stories. So I get in there, and there's already a photographer set up with his new wave canvas rolled out with the little triangle, the paint spatters. I never liked those things. And 2, strobe umbrellas. I keep walking past him. There's another guy with his paint spattered backdrop and his umbrellas. And I'm like, fuck, and I go down, and I'm kind of stuck at the end near the banister of this beautiful pewter staircase that goes up to the balcony at the Wiltern Theater. So what I had was this 8x10 camera, like not even 4x5, but 8x10. So it's stretched out to do a close-up shot. You have to extend the bellows. This is one of those cameras that look like an accordion with the bellows. So it's stretched out this big. And my little fetish back then was a bare light bulb on a strand, like some kind of Charles Bukowski apartment or something. So I remember him when he came in, like, he kind of looked down the row of photographers. He's like, no, he looked at me. He's like, what's that? So he did the photos with the guy and did photos with the guy, and he kind of worked his way down to me. He's just kind of looking at this big camera. But people react. They feel, it feels important to them, maybe. So I think Merle had, there's never a bad reaction with a big piece of gear like that. People feel, I think it makes them feel like they're, ooh, it's like an oil painting they're doing of me or something. And just the process is different because they're used to, come on, baby, or whatever. And this is like, don't fucking move. I'm going away for a while under this blanket. You won't see me for a bit. So I think it shakes him up. I think I think he enjoyed it. We both got kind of high. When neither one of us were talking that much, I think we're just gonna, let's do some pictures. Well, Dolly Parton started with, there was a friend of mine who lived in my house. He had dated a musician that we all know, and they had a rather tumultuous breakup. And he needed a place to live, so I gave him my couch for a while. This is over on Shelby Avenue, East Nashville, 1990s. And this friend of mine, he was from Knoxville, good musician. And he started playing with some guys, and he was coming in every day, kind of tired. They were practicing. And one day he came home and said, man, you won't believe what happened. And I said, what's that? He said, Dolly Parton came by the garage. And the guy I'm in the band with is her cousin. He said, Dolly Parton came in and watched us play. I said, that's amazing. So a few days go by, and he comes home again. And I'm like, how's your day, dear? He said, you won't believe what happened today. And I said, what, Dolly Parton came by? He said, Dolly Parton came by, and she sat in with us. I'm like, no kidding. A few days go by, he comes home again. He goes, Dolly came by and she wants to record an album with us. And I said, you're kidding me. And that's what happened. And she was going back to her kind of Appalachian roots, something kind of gritty. And sure enough, she started making a record with these guys. And he was coming home every day, just elated, couldn't believe it. So, of course, I wanted to horn in on the action. I said, she's going to need some pictures for this album cover sooner or later, right? And he said, well, yeah, let me ask her cousin who's in the band. So he said, yeah, bring your portfolio by. So my portfolio during the day, and I'll kind of go back, I had this picture, I had all the musicians and the celebrities, but I had some other stuff. And I had a picture of this dead possum. One day I was at home over there on Shelby Avenue, getting ready to go to Los Angeles to do a job. And I'm battening down the hatches, getting ready to leave, and I look in the backyard, and there's this big mound of gray. And I thought it was my cat, Poopy. I said, Poopy. And I ran out to the yard. It wasn't Poopy. I saw her skitter off by the fence. It was a dead possum. And I thought, well, I'll deal with that when I get back from L.A. So I go to L.A. for a couple weeks. I come back, and I look out there. It's like, oh, yeah, that dead possum. And I went out, and it had been, animals had picked at it, and it was just the perfect bones laid out of a possum. If you know Peter Beard's aerial photographs of the elephants that were massacred in Africa, there was kind of an homage to that, kind of an East Nashville homage to Peter Beard with the dead possum. So I thought, I'll get out there with my 4x5 camera on the tripod, and I did this kind of lovely study of the dead possum bones. I kind of liked the picture, and it ended up in my portfolio, along with whoever else was in there at the time. So as I'm taking the portfolio over, for ultimately Dolly to look at, I was already over there. I said, let me take out this one picture. And I was going to the dead possum, surely not going to get me, any favors with Dolly. And her cousin said, no, leave it in there. Just leave your book. It's great. I said, okay. So I left it, and a few days later, I went back to pick up the book, and I said, well, did she like everything? And they said, yeah, she liked it. She was going through the pictures. She goes, I like this, I like this. She's going through, and she gets to the dead possum picture. She goes, this is the guy I want to shoot my album cover. So I got the job. So then I started meeting with Dolly, and sure enough, because, she'd gone through quite a few of those airbrush butterfly tableaus, just Dolly fantasy, you can't tell what planet you're on, these things. And so we met, and I said, I don't do that kind of stuff. She goes, I know. It's not what we're going to do. So, she's going back to her roots, wants something gritty. And, I didn't have to explain to her about me. She just got it. She really, I hadn't seen pictures like this of her in a long time. They really were that kind of just over-the-top fantasy stuff. But man, she was down to do it Herrington style. So, there was a bit of setup. She was talking about when she moved to Nashville in the early 60s. And she goes, can we get like a 62 Cadillac? That's the year I came to Nashville. I said, yeah, we can do that. But otherwise, I went and just found these down and dirty locations, north of town, up in Jolton. This place, I noticed, has been fixed up since, but it was just a dirty little gas station, abandoned, I think, at the time, where we did some stuff. But, she had her bus and 3 makeup people and all this for Harrington-style natural light, no tripod, just handheld, kind of stuff. Oh, I did get a car wrangler who brought the Cadillac. He was an exact Charles Manson lookalike. But he brought this Cadillac, and it was just gleaming new, like restored, perfect, just waxed. And I was like, that's not a car these people, these musicians, because the thing was like her and her band. And I shot the band, too. She was not going to just be Dolly. She's like, I'm going to bring all the guys. And I said, well, if you guys are busting it through the rural honky-tonks playing a gig, which is sort of, I guess, the thing we were leading towards, you're not going to be in a waxed museum quality car. So Charles Manson, he said, never worry. He had this big canvas tarpaulin, and he put it over the car, and he had all this dust on it. He was like bringing the fabric up and picked it off the car, and the car was completely covered in dust. Then he kind of like turned the wipers on, and suddenly he just had this smeary windshield. He had some weak tea or coffee in a spray bottle solution. He sprayed it on the chrome bumpers, and the stuff beads up, and it just looks like those dots of rust. Manson aged this car perfectly in like 15 minutes. He was one of the better car wranglers I've worked with. So at some point, she called me back a year or 2 later to do another album cover. Little Sparrow was the second one. And this one was even more, didn't even have an assistant for this one. Found this cabin somewhere. I can't ever remember where it was, maybe outside of town somewhere. Photographed her. I remember it being she and I. There must have been a hair and makeup person there, but we're just in this cabin doing these very intimate shots. Again, handheld, all black and white. I don't think I shot any color. I used to really piss off people in the 90s because everybody wanted glitzy Music Row. There was an art director who used to yell at me, like wanted me to have reflectors and just fill all the space up with light, no shadows. And I'm Mr. Noir shadow guy, so it was always bumping heads. So it was great not to have anyone there for that, because there's some dark, kind of almost southern gothic kind of darkness in some of those pictures. It was cool. It was kind of cool and dark. We shot until after dark, just me and Dolly out, shot these silhouettes of her. It was so cool. I just, somehow I thought, I want to get some pictures of her writing. This is the second time in this cabin, and I just lit a candle and had her at this desk on the inside of the cabin. It's turned out to be one of the shots people really like, and I like, and it's her writing, because, for all the glamorousness of Dolly and her boobs and wigs and hair and all the stuff, she's a magnificent songwriter. So I'm kind of proud of that shot because I got her, she's not really writing, of course, but, it reflects on her as a writer. So I kind of like it. And it's just available light, wide open. It's probably Tri-X pushed to 1600, so it's dirty, gritty film. Like, I'm assuming most people would not shoot Dolly that way. They would have a lot of lights and, but this was 35 millimeter pushed to 1600, just as, nuts as you can get. And it's, along with the one standing beside the car, are my two favorites. It took me decades to think that that might be true, but I think she's so astute. She doesn't do anything by accident, and she's hip. She hung out at the factory with Andy Warhol. She's hip. She's been on the gay scene. She's been on like every scene through the 70s, 80s, 90s. So, I think it took a long time for me just thinking I got lucky and, maybe she, but no, I think she, my current theory is that she wanted what I had and she got it. There was somewhere along the way, I was still living in Nashville at that point before I left, and I was getting on an airplane to go to Los Angeles. And I was doing the walk of death, when you get on the plane and you're behind everyone, go into your seat, and you're just kind of boom, boom, step at a time, staring at the floor, waiting to get to 34B back there where your economy seat is. But I'm still in first class, just waiting, kind of looking, and I hear, "Well, hey, Jim." I look over, and it's Dolly in first class there. I said, "Hey, Dolly." And I look down the aisle at all the people, and everyone's looking at me because I guess it's amazing that Dolly's here, but she's like, "Well, who is this guy that Dolly knows?" Just little old me. You going to L.A.? I hope so, Dolly. I didn't want to say, I hope we don't crash, because that's a bummer, right? I almost went that way. So, and then I get to the airport, and, Dolly's gone, of course, but I'm waiting for my bags and just these massive, trunks like people used to travel with in the Victorian age. Just trunk after trunk, wigs and costumes and clothes were coming. They weren't marked, but there was a porter there. I said, "Dolly?" This was the 90s, and I was living in Nashville. And there was this Russian bluegrass band. I forget their name. Bering Strait. But they were great, and they were cool, Russian kids. So I had a job to shoot their album cover. I went out to California and photographed them out in the desert. We did all these elaborate things. And so I think maybe the next day they were doing a showcase at the Roxy. So I went to the Roxy and took those pictures. And there was a party next door at the Rainbow Room. They're on Sunset, right on the Roxy. So, and it's for this band, I guess. So we all kind of go over to the Rainbow Room, and it's packed. It's like packed to where you can't even like move. There's like faces, like you're just in there. And there's Tony Brown, If you don't know Tony Brown, he was a big producer and label guy at MCA Records Nashville in the 80s and 90s. He also played piano for Elvis Presley in the 70s. Cool guy. We always got along great. I always liked him and hadn't seen him in a while. And I bump into him. And it's like, "Oh, hey, Tony." And he's right. He goes, "Hey, Jim, how you doing?" He goes, "Hey, do you know Joe Strummer?" And he like spun me around, and there's Joe Strummer's face like right there. And it's like, "Oh, hey, Joe." So we meet each other, and then, everybody's cool. It's a party. And anyway, the night ends, and somehow everyone's gone but me and Joe Strummer at the bar, at the Rainbow Room. And, because he's a curious and interesting guy, he's asking me about me. So I'm telling him about Nashville and photographing all these country people, and he loves that because he loves that kind of music. So he's like, "Oh, wow." And I'm telling him some obscure rockabilly people that I've dug up, and he's loving all this kind of country music, Tennessee stories. And then I say, "Well, enough about me. What are you doing here, Joe?" And he said, "Well, today I sung a duet with Johnny fucking Cash." I said, "Oh, no, you're up at Rick Rubin's or something, right?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "That is unbelievable." So we started talking about Johnny, and he was just so proud and so like over the moon about Johnny Cash and the fact that he had done this. He was like a schoolboy. So we kept drinking whiskey, and we were getting quite drunk and having a good time together. And so finally, I think we just got too drunk and we had to leave. And he said, "You know what you ought to do? You ought to come by the studio tomorrow." I said, "Joe, you're a big man, but can you be inviting me to Rick Rubin's and Johnny Cash's? Like, oh, I got this guy I met at a bar to show up." He goes, "No, it'll be fine." So he gave me, I still have it. He gave me this, literally, this piece of paper, not even this big, with the map on it to Rick Rubin's house. And it was basically, it looked like a Y. We were drunk. He goes, "Here's the map." It's like just a line and a line. It's like, I'll find that. And I did. So it was, I guess he told me some stuff, but it was Rick Rubin. I think he's still there, but it's some big silent screen mansion from the 20s right off Sunset Boulevard, West Hollywood. So I went there in the morning, raging hangover, and I go to the gate and buzz, and the big gate opens, and I go, all around the property and swirling through the thing, around to the back. It's like a 4-car garage. Garage doors open, and Strummer walks out. "Oh, you made it, mate." And so I get out of the car, and it's like, "How you feel?" He goes, "I don't feel good either." But he's already up, and he's, I look in the garage, and on top of Rick Rubin's yellow Corvette and some other car, and on a table are these big pieces of poster paper. And there's lyrics, words. And I'm like, "What are you doing, Joe?" He goes, "Well, yesterday I did my duet with Johnny, but today I'm here. I kind of invited myself. I'm going to try and pitch a song to Johnny." I said, "Oh, I see." So he was just writing. He goes, I'm writing a song kind of about a guy like Johnny, but Johnny can sing it. So Johnny can sing it, but it's about a guy like Johnny. So I'm trying all these different things. So he goes, "You want a cup of tea?" So we go up into Rubin's kitchen, and I remember Strummer like, "The only fucking drink is green tea. Where's it? There's any proper tea in here?" So then Rick Rubin kind of appeared, and I remember that it doesn't seem like Rick Rubin walks. He's just like on a floating carpet. He just kind of showed up, and then like, but he found some black tea for us. So we made some good, strong black tea, and then we went back down to the garage, smoked a joint, did a few pictures, but then he goes, "Well, you're from the South. You know this about this kind of stuff. What throw some words at me. What kind of?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." So I started thinking about things, and I just started blurting out stuff. I said, "King Cotton's down the road." And he goes, "Oh, that's a good one." And doing some other ones, and then his wife Luce came by, and his daughter, and then I don't know. So we hung out, and Smokey Hormel came up out of the studio, and then Johnny came up. Johnny had been down in the studio the whole time, so he came up and left. And so anyway, we hung out all day, and then finally left. Traded a few emails with Joe, and then he, fucking dies. Has a heart attack like 6 months later, I think. So anyway, I had ended up moving to Milwaukee for a couple strange years, and had this girlfriend, and one day we went to this coffee shop for a brunch for breakfast or something. It's kind of packed, and we went in there, and we got our favorite corner in the window where you're kind of facing everybody and not amongst them, and it's right beside the front door, and we're sitting there having our coffee. The door opens, and this guy walks in that I kind of remember from a party, but I don't really know him. And the place is really loud, one of those loud morning places. And he goes, "Oh, you think about both of you?" And I'm like, "What?" He goes, your song's on that thing by then." I'm like, "What's he saying?" And she's like, "I don't know, I can't hear him either." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Your thing's on the thing." And it's like, well, seems important, and I can't hear him. So I got up, and I said, "What were you saying? And what's your name again?" He goes, "We met at a party." "Oh, yeah." He goes, your song's on that album. I said, what song, what album? He said, the new Joe Strummer album is out and posthumously released because he died, and they released the stuff he was working on. He said, your song. I said, oh, did I tell you about that? And I said, really? He goes, yeah, go check it out. Your line's in that song. I said, no shit. So anyway, I go find the record and there's lyrics in it. And it's like, sure enough, King Cotton's Down the Road is in that song. I'm like, well, I'll be damned. No co-write credit. But it's all right. Had he moved my tripod, I wouldn't have given him photo credit either. And I don't know, 6 months after he died or something, or maybe even a year, I get a phone call. And hello, hi. I was a friend of. I'm a friend of Luce, Joe Strummer's wife, and I was a friend of Joe. And they were like, "Oh, I'm sorry about Joe." He said, "Yeah, we're very close." And I still go over to their house, and I always have seen this picture of him. And I believe you took it. He described it, and I said, yeah, that's mine. He goes, I miss him so much. I just, want a little piece of him around the house. I was like, do you sell prints? I said, yeah. And he said, is there any way I could buy a print of this? I said, oh, yeah, absolutely. And I gave him a super good, family prize. I'm not looking to profit on this with Joe dying and stuff. So I said, yeah, just, send me this much or something. And shipping, because it was, and he goes, okay. And he said, send it to blah, 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 limited, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wow, that suddenly got kind of, I thought it was the old guy in the tweed jacket, the gardener next door or something, And suddenly it was, send it to something enterprises. So I said, okay. I started wondering, who is this something enterprises? So I started Googling around. Well, turns out this Damien that I was talking to was none other than the richest artist in the history of art in the world, Damien Hirst. And I gave him a good price, and he's worth he sold one thing for $100 million. I guess he's worth $300 million or something. But I gave him a good price on this print. But whatever. Again, I don't care. So, by the time I heard Charlie Rich, he wasn't at Sun. He was at, I guess, Monument or wherever they did, hey, did you happen to see the most beautiful girl? Oh, no, that wasn't Monument, because that was, what's his name that produced it? Billy Sherrill, yeah. But anyway, whatever, that was 70s. And I love that stuff. I was a kid. That was 73 or something? So I was 10 years old. But I love that and the other one, Behind Closed Doors, off that record. I love both those records, and they just sounded so adult. I didn't really know what went on behind closed doors, but it sounded interesting. It sounded naughty. It sounded adult. I knew I didn't understand it. I didn't even care yet. I just loved the mystery of Behind Closed Doors. And this most beautiful girl in the world is somebody. And I loved his voice, so I really loved him. I was a big Charlie Rich fan. So getting the chance to photograph him was pretty great. So I took those pictures in a hotel room, and then I went to his backyard that same day, that first time, and I got some pictures of him in a hammock that were nice. And anyway, those were pretty cool hang. Got to meet Charlie Rich. And in a rare moment of visionary self-promotion, I sent a couple prints because Bill Bentley out at Warner Brothers, or Bill Bentley out in L.A., was producing that Pictures and Paintings. And, he was a big Charlie Rich fan and did he produce that? Or he at least was, put it into motion. So I sent 2 prints out to him. I said, I can tell you're a Charlie Rich fan. That's a rare club we're in. So he's like, oh man, these are great. Thanks. He goes, we need more pictures because there's more going on with this record. Can you go back to Memphis to shoot him again? And this time I was going to make some real money. I said, yeah. So I went to Charlie's house, and we were going to do just they needed publicity photos. So this is when I really found out, as I would find out through the years, the real state of Charlie Rich. So I went there, and he just wasn't into it. He's like, just because, he wasn't into the music business. He wasn't into any of that shit. He didn't even want to play music for money. He loved music. He played it all day, every day. But the business, he had left it, and he had no interest in it. He just, anything to do with it. So we were trying to take these pictures, and they're horrible pictures. They're so terrible. He just looks like he's in an electric chair or something. He looks tortured. So he finally stood up, and he goes, "Let's go to Colt." I'm like, "Let's go to Colt? What's that?" So Colt is Colt, Arkansas, where he was born. And I said, "Okay, let's go to Colt." So we got in his Porsche. I brought just a camera or two. I left all the other shit there. And we drove together over the Mississippi River into Colt, Arkansas. Colt is like a crossroads. It's, if that, Colt is nothing. It's just an area more than a town. But it's where Charlie was born and raised. So we went. On the way, he stopped at a package store and filled the back of the Porsche up with, what kind of cheap beer was it? Schaefer, just something dreadful. Alcoholic beer all day. So we got there, and we went to this old shack that, I'm not sure if that's where he was born, but certainly could have been. Just some old shack. He had an old Jeep in a fallen apart carport garage. So we got in the Jeep. We got out of the Porsche, got into the Jeep. We went into town to get some gas. We went to this kind of full-service gas station with the roof off the Jeep, right? And we went up there, and I don't know why I always remember this. It was just so funny, but we pulled up to get gas, and we're just sitting there because it's full service, and these just two big, they were probably 15-year-olds, but they were just giant, big, meaty boys, just like hogs, just these big pink faces, and they're tall and just big, short haircut, and they're like wiping the windows and pumping the gas. And then this woman, matronly woman, comes out, and she goes, "Is that Charlie Rich?" And, "Hey, Doris, how you been? It's been forever." So, they have known each other forever. And she's standing there talking. She goes, "Are these your boys?" She goes, "Yeah, that's Tommy and Jimmy." And he goes, "How old are they?" He goes, "He's 12 and he's 13. They're literally 6'5". I just remember Charlie going, "The hell are you feeding these boys?" It's not that funny, but it was funny because they were elephants. They were giant. So anyway, we're going to go fishing. That's the deal. He's going to take me up to his childhood fishing hole. And it's just on the highest point of Arkansas, which is like 200 feet above sea level, but it's kind of this hilly area, and there's a pond. There's nobody up there. So we drive up there. He's got all the beer in the back of the Jeep. So we start drinking and fishing together. It's just he and I. And, I'm snapping a picture every once in a while, and so much better than the stiff publicity shit we were doing, which was my mistake to be doing that stuff. But that's the other thing with these things. You feel like that's what the record company wants. But anyway, so we're shooting and drinking and fishing. And then we're getting pretty drunk. We go sit in the field for a while near the lake and just talk and drink, kind of like a picnic, kind of dappled sunlight coming through the trees, sitting there with Charlie Rich, drinking cheap beer, quiet. And then we kind of start walking through the forest, and there's kind of a cliffy, rocky thing, and it's like, oh, this is kind of good for pictures. It's like, maybe stand over here. So he's drunk at this point, and and I'm pretty well into it myself. So he gets out on the edge of this thing. And he turns around and he looks at me and he just has this startled, and he does a complete windmill with the arms like, whoa. And Charlie Rich almost goes off the cliff. I mean, it was a death fall. And he barely didn't go over. But his face was drained of blood. And I'm like, oh, fuck it, forget these photos. Anyway, we cut him out of the forest, get back in the Jeep. He drunk drives us down the dirt road back to the cabin. It's nighttime now. And it's been a hot day. It's like, had a bunch of beer and sunlight. And we're both kind of like drowsy. So, obviously I'm spending the night. So I sit on the couch, and he kind of disappears in the back of the house or something. And I'm just kind of, I kind of doze off for a minute, all that sunshine and beer. And I kind of, next time I open my eyes, there's only one light on in the house, and it's this lamp. Next time I open my eyes, there's a full silhouette of Charlie Rich. And at this point in his career, due to all the Schaefer beer, he had a monstrous belly. And so anyway, the view I have is a silhouette side view, and I catch him in mid getting the last sip out of the bottom of the Schaefer can. He's got his head turned straight up. He's also got a kind of a big winter scarf around his neck. It's July, it was hot as hell outside. And he's wearing absolutely no clothes except tighty whities, no socks. He's bone naked except for these scrunched up tighty whities. And that's my first view upon waking. I'm like, all right. So I'm sitting there, and his head goes down. He kind of does the shaking of the can, puts it on a table, and he goes over to this Wurlitzer, just old family Wurlitzer pushed against the wall. Pulled the thing out, still has this big winter scarf around his neck. His tighty whities are only half covering his buttocks, and he sits down at the stool and just starts going into this late night Charlie Rich Wurlitzer stuff. And can't remember if he kind of would sing, kind of, but moaning and kind of humming, and might have whistled, but mostly it was just a soulful Wurlitzer playing. And that's how I drifted off to sleep that night on the couch.